She was sitting at the kitchen table with her arms crossed when I walked through the door, and the look on her face was one I had never seen in 11 years of marriage. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something worse than both of those things combined. It was the look of someone who believed they had already won. There was an envelope on the table with my name on it, and she thought she knew exactly what was inside my chest when I saw it. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea. Let me go back, because none of this story makes sense if you start at the end. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 46 years old. I run 2 commercial HVAC companies out of Charleston, South Carolina, one on the peninsula, one serving the North Charleston corridor, and I have spent the last 2 decades building something from nothing in a city that does not make that easy. My hands have been in ductwork in every kind of weather this coast can produce. I know what it means to show up and grind, and I know what it means to be patient, because patience is what the work demands of you every single day. I want you to hold on to that detail about patience. It matters more than anything else I'm going to tell you. Renee and I had been together for 14 years, married for 10. We bought a house in the Wagoner Terrace neighborhood, one of those wide porch homes with original heart pine floors and windows that rattle slightly when a truck rolls past, and we spent a decade making it ours. Saturday mornings were her reading in the back garden while I made coffee too strong for anyone else to drink. Weeknights were her on the couch with her shoes off and me trying to convince her that whatever show she wanted to watch was fine with me. It was real. It was quiet. It was mine. I'm going to tell you something about myself that matters for this story. I am not a suspicious man. I'm the kind of person who believes what people tell me until I have a reason not to. Some people would call that naive. I used to call it trust. I understand now that those 2 things are not always the same. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday evening in late spring. Renee works as a patient coordinator at an orthopedic clinic downtown, and she'd left her phone on the counter while she ran upstairs. When she came back and saw it sitting there, she moved to pick it up with this particular speed I'd never seen before. Not panic, just a quickness that wasn't normal. I made a small joke about it and she laughed it off. Work drama, she said. You know how it gets. I nodded. I left it alone. And I almost forgot it entirely, because that is who I am. Except over the following 3 weeks, it kept happening. The phone went everywhere with her, to the bathroom, out onto the back porch when she stepped out for air, into the garage when she went to get something from the freezer. A phone she used to leave face up on the coffee table for hours without a second thought suddenly needed to be in her hand at all times. She put a lock on it for the first time in a decade of marriage. When I asked about it, casually, trying not to make it into something it might not be, she mentioned a phishing scare at the clinic, some kind of staff-wide security reminder. Plausible. Totally plausible. Except I found myself sitting with it later, and something about it didn't quite settle. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was projecting. I told myself a lot of things that fall, and every single one of them was wrong. By midsummer, she started taking calls outside, not out of the room, out of the house. She'd step onto the front porch or walk down the driveway to the sidewalk, positioning herself with her back to the windows in a way that felt almost deliberate. I'd hear the low murmur of her voice through the glass, and by the time she came back in, her face would be composed, easy, like she'd simply stepped out for air. Every time I asked who it was, she had an answer ready. Her college roommate, her sister having a hard month, her coworker working through something difficult, each answer immediate, each answer just detailed enough to sound unscripted. Here's what 14 years of marriage teaches you, if you're paying attention. You learn the sound of the person you love telling the truth. And you learn slowly, horribly, the sound of them performing the truth. Those are 2 different sounds. They're close enough that most people never notice the difference. I noticed. I didn't say anything. I wasn't ready. And something in my gut told me that if I moved too early, I'd lose whatever advantage I didn't yet know I needed. The moment I couldn't rationalize away came on a Thursday. I had wrapped up a job estimate early out in Somerville and came home an hour and a half before Renee expected me. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop open and papers spread out in front of her. And the second that front door opened, before I'd even said a word, she snapped the laptop shut and covered the papers with both hands like I'd caught her with something. I made a joke of it. Just me, I said, not a burglar. She laughed, but her hands stayed on the papers. Startled me, she said. Just some clinic stuff. Budget projections. Nothing interesting. She gathered everything into a folder and moved it to the bedroom, and I stood in my kitchen smiling like everything was completely normal. But I had seen one word in the corner of a page before her hands came down. Settlement. I told myself it could be anything. A patient's insurance settlement, a billing dispute. I am extraordinarily good at talking myself out of alarm. That skill has never served me worse than it did that week. But I filed the word away, and it sat in the back of my mind like a stone in a shoe. A week and a half later, she mentioned she was meeting a coworker for dinner. A woman named Diane she'd grown close to. They were going to try the new place over on Rutledge. Completely ordinary. Not even worth noting. Except, I had a client in that neighborhood that afternoon, and afterward I found myself driving past the restaurant, not quite intending to stop, not quite intending to look. She was outside. Not inside, outside. Standing near the corner of the building, pacing maybe 8 feet in each direction, phone pressed to her ear, shoulders up near her ears in the way she holds herself when she's stressed about something she can't show. I pulled over half a block away. I sat in my truck and watched her through the windshield. I couldn't hear everything the street was moving. A delivery truck idling nearby, but I caught enough. I'm not backing out. I just need more time. Once everything goes through, we can finally move forward. I promise you. Move forward. Not work things out. Not figure out what's wrong. Move forward, as if the life we'd been living together was already a finished chapter, and she was reading the first line of the next one with somebody else. I drove home. I don't know what I would have done if she'd looked up and seen me sitting there. I genuinely don't know. She came home an hour later full of stories about Diane, what Diane ordered, what they talked about, how Diane was thinking about going back to school. It was detailed and easy and completely fluent, the way a story sounds when it has been rehearsed enough times that it no longer feels like lying. I listened to every word. When she finished, I said, "You know, we've never really put all our financial stuff in one place. Account info, passwords, all of it, in case something happened." I watched her face when I said it. Something moved behind her eyes, just a flicker, less than a second, and then it was gone, replaced by a look of pleasant agreement. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking the exact same thing. We really should do that, just to be organized." Her voice was warm and casual, and I smiled and said, "Yeah, that's smart," and went back to whatever I was doing. But my heart was going like a jackhammer inside a quiet building. She brought up the organizing conversation 4 more times over the next week. Every time slightly more specific. Did I know our joint account login? Did I know where the title to her car was filed? Had I ever put the deed paperwork anywhere besides the lockbox? A woman who had never in a decade asked me where a single document lived was building herself an inventory, and I kept answering, pleasantly, calmly, while something cold and quiet was forming in my chest. I'm going to be honest with you about this moment, because I think you deserve honesty. I want you to understand what it feels like to be standing in your own kitchen, talking to the person you built your life with, while your mind is going a completely separate direction. You're saying the right words and making the right face and loading the dishwasher. And underneath all of that, some part of you is doing math you never wanted to do. That part of you is already grieving. And you haven't even confirmed that there's anything to grieve yet. On a Wednesday morning after she left for work, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up our joint checking account. 11 years of marriage, and I had never once gone through it line by line. I did that morning. What I found wasn't dramatic on the surface. That's what made it so bad. It was careful. Over the previous 6 weeks, $380 here, $520 there, $450, $600. Each one timed, spaced out, each one just under the threshold that would have triggered our bank's automatic alert. All of them moved to an account I'd never set up and didn't recognize. A basic savings label, generic, forgettable. Someone had been very deliberate about all of it. I sat at that table for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't get angry. I felt something drop in the center of me, slow and heavy, like a key falling to the bottom of deep water. That afternoon, I called a guy I'd known since we were both trying to figure ourselves out at the College of Charleston, Terrence Aldridge, who'd gone on to become a family law attorney in Columbia. I told him everything. When I finished, he let the line sit quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Marcus, I can't tell you for certain what's coming, but I can tell you that if any piece of what you've just described is real, you need to move right now, quietly, legally, before she does." He walked me through it with the patience of someone who has had this exact conversation too many times before. How to identify and document my separate property, the inheritance from my grandfather, my 401k contributions from the years before Renee and I were together, my stake in a small commercial property I'd carried since before we met, and how to move those assets cleanly, in a way that was undeniably, provably, legally mine. Notarized. Dated. Airtight. "This isn't hiding anything," Terrence told me. "This is protecting what was always yours. If she's already building a case, the worst thing you can do is stand still." So I got moving. methodically, quietly, without a single word to anyone else. Every transfer documented, every date stamped, every signature notarized and filed in a way that would hold up under whatever was coming. I did not feel smart doing it. I felt sad in a way I didn't have language for. I was dismantling the shared architecture of a marriage, one legal document at a time, and every step forward felt like a small, irreversible goodbye. I thought that was enough. I thought I had done what I needed to do. Then something in me decided I needed to know one more thing. Exactly what number Renee thought she was walking away with. This is the part I want to be careful about, because I've thought about it a lot since. I know there are people who will hear what I did next and call it manipulative, and I understand that. I sat with it. I still sit with it. But I kept coming back to that word settlement, and I kept hearing her voice outside that restaurant. Move forward. Someone had already decided the marriage was over. I just didn't know what they thought the payout was supposed to be. Here is something I had learned about Renee over 14 years. She responds to large numbers the way a compass responds to north. Not out of greed, exactly, or not only greed. It was something closer to a deep, baseline hunger for security, for proof that the future was solid. She grew up in a family where money was always thin and always anxious, and I think somewhere underneath everything else, she had never fully trusted that what we had was enough. I used to think it was something I could reassure her out of. By August, I had stopped thinking that. So I gave her a number to find. I opened a legitimate brokerage account, in my name only, and funded it with a modest amount from savings I'd held separately since before we were married. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would raise questions. Then, using the kind of projected growth statement that every financial advisor's office prints by the hundreds, the kind that illustrates what an account might look like in 10 years under favorable conditions, I printed a single page. It was clearly labeled in the footer as a projected estimate, the way those documents always are. But out of context, glanced at by someone who was already looking for a number, it read like a current balance. A balance that sat at nearly 3 times what Renee believed our combined net worth to be. I left it in my desk drawer in the home office. Not hidden, not displayed, just there, under a layer of old warranty paperwork and insurance folders, in the kind of spot you only find if you're going through things deliberately. Then I waited. I want to tell you I felt clever doing it. I didn't. I felt hollow. I sat on the edge of the bed that night and I thought about who I'd been 11 years ago when I carried her over the threshold of this house as a joke because she'd laughed and dared me to, and I thought about the distance between that moment and this one, and I felt the full weight of it. 4 days later, I came home to find the home office door not quite closed the way I always leave it. The insurance folder was in its place. The document was tucked back underneath it. But the angle was different. Someone had been in that drawer. And then Renee changed. Not dramatically, not in any way most people would notice. But I had 14 years of her as my reference point, and I noticed everything. The tension she'd been carrying in her shoulders for months gone. The short, guarded phone calls shorter still, and lighter in tone. She started humming in the kitchen again, something she hadn't done since early spring. She suggested we go walk through a furniture showroom over on King Street one Saturday afternoon, just to look, something we'd done exactly once since we first moved in together. She stopped in front of a dining table that cost more than our living room and ran her fingers along the edge of it with an expression I can only describe as anticipatory. Like she was already picturing it somewhere specific. Like she had a specific somewhere already in mind. She thought she had found the real number. She had found exactly what I needed her to find. The organizing conversation stopped completely. She already had what she needed. Instead, she went quiet in a different way. Purposeful quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from someone who has made a decision and is simply waiting for the right moment to act on it. I recognized it because I had spent 3 months learning to produce the exact same silence. On a Thursday evening in October, I came home to the kitchen table. The envelope. Her crossed arms. That expression I had never seen before. Her lawyer had filed that afternoon at the Charleston County Family Court. Her requests were not modest. Half the house equity. Half of what she'd identified as joint investment accounts. Spousal support calculated against income figures our household had never actually produced, and listed specifically, by account type, a balance that matched nearly to the dollar the projection number on the page she'd found in my drawer. She had built her entire opening offer around a number I had manufactured to see what she would do with it. I set the papers down. I kept my voice level. I said we could discuss it through our attorneys. She looked faintly disappointed that I wasn't more visibly shaken. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Marcus," she said. "I just need to be realistic. We both know this hasn't been working." I looked at her for a moment. I thought about everything I had swallowed in the previous 4 months. I thought about her pacing outside that restaurant. I thought about the patient, careful cash withdrawals. I thought about the word settlement on a page she hadn't wanted me to see. I said, "Okay." And I went to call Terrence. "I want you to sit with what came next, because I think this is the part of the story that deserves to be slowed down." The mediation was at a downtown conference suite 3 weeks later. Terrence had prepared everything. He'd been quietly thorough, in a way I hadn't fully appreciated until I watched him work. Renee's attorney was a woman named Patricia Holbrook, immaculate posture, a voice that could cut glass, the kind of attorney who opens negotiations like she's doing you a favor by being in the room. She slid a folder across the table and named her client's requests with complete, unruffled confidence. It was a large number. It referenced by name an investment account with a balance just north of $200,000. And it carried with it the particular energy of someone who knows they're holding the stronger hand. Terrence didn't open the folder. He adjusted it slightly with 2 fingers, looked at Patricia Holbrook with an expression of genuine patience, and said, "There's been a significant misunderstanding, and I'd like to walk through it carefully, because I don't want anyone in this room to be embarrassed." I watched Renee's face. I watched it the way you watch weather building over the harbor. Terrence laid it out piece by piece. The brokerage account existed here was the documentation. Opened in October, in Marcus Webb's name only, funded with premarital savings. Here were the records. Here was the actual balance. Here, separately, was the projected growth statement, the kind produced routinely by every financial advisory firm in the country, as an illustration of potential growth under ideal market conditions, clearly labeled as such in the footer in standard disclaimer language, never presented to anyone as a current balance, never discussed with Mrs. Webb at any point. "My client made no representation about this account to his wife," Terrence said. "He never mentioned it. He never showed it to her. If someone accessed private paperwork without his knowledge and interpreted a clearly labeled projection document as a current balance, that is not a misrepresentation of a marital asset. It is a misreading of a financial illustration. I want to describe to you what I saw happen on Renee's face in that moment, because I've thought about it many times since, and it was not what I expected. It wasn't rage. It wasn't defiance. It was something much quieter and much harder to watch. It was the moment a person realizes the ground they were standing on was never solid. The color left her face slowly, the way light leaves a room when the sun drops behind something large. "That's not," she started, stopped. Her eyes moved to the paper Patricia Holbrook was already scanning, jaw tight, reading the fine print for the first time. "That number," Renee said. "I saw it. I know what I saw." "You saw a projection," Terrence said, not unkindly, "clearly labeled. Would you like to review the footer again?" Patricia Holbrook set the page down. She asked for a 15-minute recess. The room was very quiet until they left. Terrence turned to me and didn't say anything. He just exhaled. When they came back, everything had changed. The $200,000 figure was gone. The joint investment line item was gone. What remained on the table was what had always legally existed, and because Terrence had documented every move I'd made, weeks before Renee ever filed a single page, the actual marital estate split came out almost exactly as North Carolina law would have required anyway. No windfall, no bonus. Renee received what she was always entitled to, and not $1 more. She did not take it quietly. The calls started that night, confused first, then pleading, then something that swung between apology and accusation within the span of a single voicemail. She called me cruel. She called the brokerage account a setup. She called me a liar, and I want you to think about that word, coming from her, in that moment, because I certainly did. I didn't respond to any of it. Terrence had told me not to, and following that instruction turned out to be the easiest thing I'd done in months. 3 weeks later, a man named Clive Patterson reached out to me. We weren't close. We knew each other through overlapping circles, golf once or twice, a couple of mutual friends, but he'd heard enough through those circles to feel uncomfortable staying quiet. He asked to meet. When I sat down across from him, he slid his phone across the table without much preamble. "I think you need to see this," he said. "I've been going back and forth. I decided you deserve to know." It was a chain of text messages between Renee and a man named Brandon, someone in commercial real estate. Someone who had apparently been at the edge of the same social circle for years without my ever registering his name. The messages went back 5 months. Before the phone lock. Before the porch calls. Before any of this had a shape I could recognize. The messages made clear that Brandon and Renee had been planning her exit together for the entire stretch, that I'd been slowly, carefully, quietly piecing things together on my end. One message from the week before mediation. Once the settlement number clears, we'll have more than enough. Just hold the line. Don't let him talk you down. Brandon's response. You've got this. We start fresh the second it clears. Start fresh. The exact phrase I had heard outside that restaurant on a summer evening that I had been trying not to understand for months. Now I had the whole sentence. The night of mediation, there was a message from Renee. The number collapsed. He somehow knew. I don't understand what happened. Brandon's reply was 4 words. He played you. Move on. And that was it. The moment the money didn't materialize, he was gone. Not a difficult conversation. Not even an explanation. 4 words, and then nothing. The person she had been planning a future with had been planning a payout. When the payout disappeared, so did he. I thanked Clive. I meant it in a way I don't think he fully understood. The divorce was finalized before the year was out. I kept the house in Wagener Terrace. I kept every asset that was documentably, legally, unambiguously mine, all of it dated and notarized weeks before she ever walked into a courtroom. Renee kept her car, her belongings, and a settlement that reflected the reality of our marriage rather than a fantasy she'd constructed around a number she never verified and I never confirmed. I won't tell you there isn't grief in all of this. 11 years is 11 years. There are Saturday mornings I still reach for more coffee than I need, and the house is very quiet, and I think about the version of her that I married, the one who left her phone face up on the counter because she had nothing to keep from me. I don't know when that version of her stopped existing. I've stopped trying to identify the exact moment. I'm not sure it would help anything to know. What I do know is this. I have thought long and hard about the bait document, and I've landed somewhere honest about it. I never lied to Renee. I never altered a real number. I never claimed that projection was anything it wasn't. I left a piece of paper in a drawer, and she chose entirely on her own, without anyone telling her what to do with it, to go through my private desk, to find that paper, and to build an entire legal strategy and an entire alternate future around a number she never once asked me to confirm. She wasn't undone by a trap. She was undone by her own absolute certainty that she already knew everything. That is not the same thing. I have thought about it enough to believe that. If you've ever been in a position where you had to choose between staying angry and staying smart, you know what that cost feels like. Anger is free. It's loud, and it's available, and it feels like doing something. Staying smart costs you something every single day you choose it. Every time I wanted to confront her, every time I wanted to demand answers in the kitchen with my voice raised, I chose the other thing instead. I didn't always feel noble about it. Most days I just felt tired. Here is what this story taught me, and I offer it not as wisdom but as what it actually is, which is something I had to learn the painful way at 46 years old. The most dangerous assumption you can make is that someone who loves you or who once loved you is playing the same game you are. Renee and I were in the same marriage for 11 years, and at some point she began playing an entirely different game without telling me. The mistake I almost made was assuming that because she was familiar to me, she was legible to me. Those are not the same thing. The question I'd leave you with is this. In the important relationships in your life, are you paying attention to the music underneath the words? Because the words will usually sound fine. It's the music you have to listen to. I want to ask you something before we go, because this story sits heavy on me, and I don't want to carry it alone. Drop a comment and tell me 1, if you think Marcus handled this exactly right, 2, if you think he went too far with the bait document, and 3, if you're still deciding. I genuinely want to know where you land. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is there, because this channel reaches people I never expected, and that still gets me every single time. If something in this story reminded you of something you've lived through, I want to hear about it. You don't have to give me details, just let me know you're out there. My mother drove up from Georgetown the first weekend after the divorce finalized with a carload of things I hadn't asked for and the absolute refusal to let me sit in a quiet house feeling sorry for myself. We repainted the home office, got rid of the desk entirely. She said it had collected too much bad energy in one place, which is not something I expected my mother to say to me, but she wasn't wrong. The house feels like mine again now. Quiet in the right way, not the suspicious kind of quiet where you're always listening for something underneath the surface. Just quiet, peaceful. It took the long road to get here, but I'm here. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what comes next. These stories are real in the ways that matter. They're about people trying to hold on to what's theirs when someone they trusted decides to take it. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Charleston, South Carolina, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.